On his fifth birthday, he was all but dumped on the porch by his aunt after her husband declared Isaac was just another mouth he didn't want to feed. After that, Isaac had spent the first few years waiting for his grandma to pass him on again, but she never did. Not once had she ever acted as though he was a burden, though he'd never stopped feeling like one. Even now, he wondered if coming here may have not been the best idea. Did his grandma have enough food, even water? Pearl frowned up at him. I know that look. I'm glad to see that some things don't change. Whatever dark thoughts you're having, son, forget them. Yes, ma'am. Come, I'll make you some tea. Pearl didn't wait for an answer as she shuffled toward the kitchen and busied herself with cups and tea bags. Eyeing the dying embers in her fireplace, he headed to the garage. The least he could do while she was making tea was to make sure she had plenty of firewood. Stepping into the garage, his eyes soon became accustomed to the darkness as he scanned the icy space. He hadn't expected to fall into old habits so quickly. Guilt ate at him every time his leave ended and he'd return to base never having stopped by Pearl's, though it was easier to handle the guilt than the flood of emotions of being home, partly why he'd rarely visited. You can do that later. Pearl startled him as she appeared at his side. She shook her head at him while ignoring his protests and all but dragged him over to her floral couch. She looked frailer than he remembered, but she was still fiery. Once she'd seen that he'd settled on the couch, she kissed the top of his head. Don't even think about doing anything, Isaac Lawrence Winters, not until you've got some hot tea in you, Pearl warned with a stern finger before disappearing back into the kitchen. Grinning despite himself, he took a long look around the room, much smaller than her front room in Bend. He'd loved that ancient house, with creaking floors and all kinds of wonders for an awkward and friendless little boy to discover. He'd never understood why Pearl sold it after he'd left for boot camp. Whenever he asked, she'd changed the subject. His eyes landed on the wall of family portraits, and his smile slipped from his face. Only the one picture of his mother, her freshman yearbook picture, in the center. It was as though she'd been frozen in time, while her older sister had multiple portraits ranging from school photos to her wedding day to the latest family portrait of her and her husband and their 4 boys. Isaac wasn't sure if his mother's one portrait was Pearl's act of loyalty to her grandson after his mom left him with his aunt as a baby, or was it the most recent picture she had? His mom had mentioned having a new family in Portland. There should be more pictures of her and her new family. Pearl returned, catching him studying the portraits. Her expression didn't change as she looked at him. It was never her place, she'd claimed, to change his feelings toward his family. Every right to be upset about his past, let down by his mom and his aunt, but she'd always encouraged him not to dwell there. While his grandma's relationship with her daughters had always been strained, at least during Isaac's lifetime, she'd continued to keep in touch with them, though he wasn't sure if Pearl still spoke with his mother. Should I ask about where your girlfriend is? Pearl asked as she placed a plate of cookies in front of him. She decided she was tired of waiting around for me, Isaac admitted. Shame. Isaac shrugged before reaching for a cookie. Better this way. She'd never want to walk all the way here to check on you in this weather. Smart woman. She raised her eyebrows at him. I've made your room up, so I'm going to assume you'll be staying with me until Meadowview smothers you? I don't want to impose. Waving his words away, Pearl told him, You're never imposing on me, Isaac. Heck, if I'd known this is what it took to get you down here, I'd have seen about cutting the power ages ago. I'm glad you're here. She shot him an encouraging smile. Now, tell me about your journey. Isaac recounted his travels, leaving out the part about all the death they'd encountered and being stalked by Nathan. And he skimmed over Cass. He only made brief mention of the state of the world right then. What Cass and he had witnessed on their journey to Meadowview would only upset Pearl, and he didn't want to do that. Still, his mind kept flitting to the man that had been pinned under his truck and how he'd failed to save him. When he'd been deployed, death had been his constant companion. The bullets from his gun had ended many lives, though he'd never kept a tally.